Hey, welcome to Conviction Without Chaos. This is our Safe Place discussion series. This is the first video in the series. I am learning how to do this as I go, and if you can't tell from my voice, I'm a little sick. I wasn't planning on starting this week, but with current events being the way that they are, I thought, oh boy, start getting these videos out before they become irrelevant. So just quickly, the format of these videos, what they're meant to do is not tell you how I feel about any particular topic and then say, this is why you need to agree with me. But instead, what I wanted to do is show you information I've collected and thought about over a period of time, and then explain that this is why I feel the way I feel about a particular topic. And whether or not you agree or disagree with that, that's great. It's to think about the discussion around these things and not to be hostile, which is becoming more and more common in our public discourse about politics and even entertainment and so on and so forth. Alright, so the title is a little cheeky for this video, but it's exactly what we're going to be discussing, is President Trump in these first few months of his second term, is he making good or bad deals when it comes to international relations? All right, we're going to start off positive and highlight the fact that President Trump did have some wins in his first term in regards to the world order. And whether or not you agree with the positivity of these outcomes or not, the point is that President Trump had some specific goals that overall were met in his first term. Okay, first up, NATO allies increased their defense spending. In 2016, only 5 countries met that 2% GDP defense spending target. But by 2020, that number had grown to 10 countries, so doubling. And as of 2024, we added another country, that's 11 out of the 31. And overall, military spending increased by over 130 billion between 2016 and 2020. And I don't think it's debatable that President Trump is really responsible for highlighting the fact that not everybody was meeting this target and that countries needed to step up and add to our collective defense. All right, next up we have that NAFTA replaced the USMCA. I know I said I wouldn't get hostile in these things, but that is the worst acronym ever. NAFTA was great because you could just say NAFTA. This one is like USMCA, and you can't say that because that's ridiculous. So you've got to instead say all those letters, and it's just awful. There's no vowel in the middle of them, so my brain just can't compute. That was a bit of a tangent. All right, so this was a well-received change, I think, overall to NAFTA. It really looked at lowering tariffs for certain industries and about bringing more automobile manufacturing into North America. So, for example, the agreement required that 25% of automobile components be manufactured in North America to qualify for zero tariffs, and that was an increase from 62.5%. It also mandates that 40 to 45% of automobile parts be made by workers earning at least $16 per hour by 2023. They're looking to make higher wages there for those manufacturing jobs. The deal also opened up dairy markets to U.S. farmers, addressing longstanding trade barriers. I wanted to bring that up in particular because there's a lot of information going around, including by President Trump, saying that dairy is tariffed at this ridiculously high rate by Canada. But really the truth of it is that you have to meet this quota before those 1,000% tariffs start being applied, and there's such high quotas that at the end of the day, as far as I know, they haven't been met. So those tariffs aren't actually being applied. And like I said, overall, I think this was a well-received deal negotiation. Everybody, US, Mexico, and Canada, seemed to be happy with it. And President Trump really did lead the initiative to make this happen. Okay, last but certainly not least, and certainly not least complicated, is the US relations with China and the changes that happened under Trump's first term. So this is a wall of text. Deal with me. To deal with the US trade gap and concerns about things like stolen tech, so intellectual property theft, the Trump administration hit China with multiple rounds of tariffs during his first term. The goal was to put pressure on China to come to the table for a better deal. These tariffs did raise the cost for US companies and sometimes consumers too, but their purpose was actually to push both sides into talks, and that seemed to work because it led to the Phase 1 trade deal in January 2020, just at the end of President Trump's first term. So in that agreement, China promised to buy more American goods and make some changes to how it handles intellectual property. Right, and just a caveat that China didn't actually meet its purchase promises that it made for Phase 1, and Phase 2 never happened. This could be because it was at the end of President Trump's first term that Phase 1 was agreed to, and for whatever reason, China and or the Biden administration decided not to go with Phase 2. I did not dig into this. I do not have the information to really have an opinion about why or what I think about China not meeting that Phase 1 plan. But I do wonder if, because they didn't continue with Phase 2, that now President Trump is maybe strong-arming because of that. It's just a guess. I don't know. But what's really important to remember is that that initial negotiating tactic with China and layering those tariffs over time did bring China to the table. And that was without using those strong 145% tariffs that they're currently imposing now. Okay, so fast forward to 2025, and whoo-wee, has the tone changed? Although President Trump has always been bold and, let's say, unconventional, to be charitable, in politics, what I'm worried about is that the difference between his first term and his second term in this unconventionalness might actually have more of a long-term impact. That's not going to work out in America's favor in the long run and might actually become dangerous for some of its allies. Okay, this is another long one. I'm going to explain how I feel like our allies could be in danger in another video when we look at Ukraine, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But in this case, let's just look at our trade partners. And tariffs are kind of the word of the day right now. And an example that's very recent, of course, is how on April 2nd, President Trump announced tariffs on about 90 countries, including allies like the United Kingdom, Germany, and Japan. The percentages assigned to each country were supposed to be based on trade deficits. Now, whether or not you agree with that doesn't matter. The point is that's what they said they were doing. And countries with low to zero tariffs or even trade surpluses like Australia were actually still given a minimum 10% tariff, which didn't make sense if these things are solely based on trade deficits. The day that these tariffs were supposed to go into effect a week later, President Trump suddenly announced in the middle of the day on social media, of all places, that he was pausing these previously announced tariffs and was going to impose this blanket 10% tariff on most countries instead. And because China reciprocated in saying that they were also going to impose tariffs when Trump initially announced their tariffs, they were instead punished, quote unquote, and their tariffs instead were bumped up to 125%, which I think is 145% now from what I've read. And again, Canada and Mexico were kind of left out of all of this because they had their own bucket of on and off pause tariffs announced the weeks before, and it ended up being no, they still had these 25% and other percentages of tariffs on something like lumber, steel, aluminum, and energy. Point is, nobody really knows what's happening, and many people are confused, and it doesn't help that the administration continually says at one point that tariffs are permanent one day, and then the next day they're a negotiation tool, and then sometimes they're both. So what's been the global reaction to all this? And I do feel like that gentleman in the corner there is an excellent representation of how the world feels about this. America is a significant economy, the strongest economy, and a lot of countries rely on exporting to the customers in America. And to have things change overnight and so drastically one day and be something different the next, whether more drastic or less drastic, is a very difficult thing for these countries to absorb. And there's already been some consequences to the application of these trade policies in these first few months of President Trump's term. And something I didn't highlight before, and I should highlight now, is that the tariffs being applied to Canada and Mexico would seemingly go against that US MCA. I hate that acronym so much. But to get around that, the administration has claimed these security issues that I think overall have been debunked by most people. Even MAGA folks, I'm sure, understand that these safety concerns, especially with Canada in particular, aren't really why these tariffs are being applied. So really there is kind of a step back from an agreement made by President Trump in that first term. And so the world's reacting. So let's take a look at Canada first. They've decided to diversify their trade portfolio, and they have stated in a very real sense that they understand that they have too much of a reliance on America and that they are going to start looking elsewhere for different trading partners.
We will need to dramatically reduce our reliance on the United States. We will need to pivot our trade relationships elsewhere. And we will need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen in generations.
And something that was certainly surprising for me to see was Japan, South Korea, and China making a point to say to the world, hey, we're going to actually strengthen our economic ties and trade because of these tariffs. And this brings up the point that if America closes its doors and applies these tariffs, will that draw more countries to have stronger ties with China? Because China and America are competing in terms of being the superpowers of the world. And regardless of what your opinion is about China being at the top spot or not, this is a good indication that that is starting to already happen. And this is a bit of a mixed bag for me, because I do believe that strong economic ties between countries is a good way to keep countries from fighting each other. And also, I think strong economic ties between countries with smaller defenses versus stronger defenses help put a security buffer around those smaller countries. So you've got a country like South Korea who has that looming threat of North Korea, and if they do build a strong tie with China, who does have some sway over North Korea, is that not inherently good for them? I don't know. That's probably something that needs to be discussed over a greater length than this. That's just me saying that this particular news, I don't know how I felt about it. This is a bit of a mixed bag for me, and at the end of the day, good for them. And last but not least is that the markets have been all over the place, up, down, mostly down, and end of the day, investors do not like chaos. They like stability, they like knowing what's happening, and they're just not getting that right now. Okay, we're almost where we need to be, so I'm getting to a point, but first we're going to look at some things that have been said by the administration about their global partners since they took office in 2025, with remembering that this is in a very small amount of time. It is currently April, and they took over in January.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal.
Oh. This has to happen. And the reason it has to happen, I hate to say it, is because our friends in Denmark have not done their job in keeping this area safe. They just haven't done it.
I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
Mr. President, how are negotiations going with Canada? There was obviously a delay in implementing those tariffs.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens.
All right, I've been talking about very serious things for a few minutes now, so I like brain breaks. So let's just look at this adorable video and listen to a very, very, very corny joke that I found online. A guy walks into a pet store looking for a unique pet. The store owner says, "Well, we got this talking centipede. He's smart, polite, and loves conversation." The guy's intrigued and buys the centipede. It even comes with a fancy little box and all. He brings it home, and he sets that box on the table, and he says to it, "Hey buddy, want to go grab a drink?" There's no response. The man tries again, louder this time. "Hey, want to go to the bar?" Still nothing. Now he's annoyed, thinking, "I've been ripped off. How can I possibly have thought that the centipede could talk?" But he thought, well, let me try one more time, and he leans in close to the box, and he yells, "Hello? I thought you could talk." And suddenly, here's this teeny voice shout back, "I heard you the first time. I'm putting on my shoes." Get it? Centipede. Anyway, corny, and I love it. Alright, so back to the real world. Why should we be concerned about this particular rhetoric that we just saw versus that 2016-2020 term? Well, if this was the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, this might actually be very entertaining. But we're not in the world of business. This is international relations. This is about world order. It's about your safety and our future generation's safety. The folks at the other end of President Trump's bargaining table, these other leaders, they have constituents that sometimes not, elect them. We can assume that the people of these countries, they have a sense of national pride, of course. And of course, the leaders probably have that sense of national pride as well. So I would ask any American, would you vote for any president who bowed to the mercy of another world leader that boasted that America was kissing his ass? We all know you, America. You would not do that. So we inevitably ask, what help makes good, appealing, and long-lasting international deals? It seems to rely on a few things. Trust is one of them. Partners need to think that you're going to keep your end of the bargain. Stability is another. A consistent and predictable approach builds confidence. Mutual benefit. Everybody needs to walk away with something. And of course, respect, which speaks for itself. Now, President Trump's history with respect has been murky at best. But in the past, he's proven that you can break one or two of these pillars that we talked about with a few partners at any given time and still end up with some favorable outcomes, like what we discussed at the beginning of the video. But can you break all of the pillars with all of your partners at once, which seems to be what's happening now? And if we do that, is this something that is going to give us positive outcomes? So what's my current take on all this? Well, it stems from the reality that America does need global partners to sell and buy from. And at the end of the day, if you blow up all your relationships all at once, you stand the risk of losing your influence. So America has a lot of cards, and President Trump says this, and he's not wrong when he says that. But if you play all your cards at once, you run the risk of having long-term pain, even if you get short-term gains from it. I mean, think about it. If somebody's strong-arming you into doing something that you don't really want to do, you might not have a choice but to immediately do the things being asked of you. But if down the road you can find other partners that will make more favorable deals with you and they're not strong-arming you, you're going to move to those partners as soon as you can. And just to go back to the analogy, even if America is left with plenty of cards after all of that, will there be anybody at the table for America to play those cards with? So to apply that to the economy again, if all these other nations make economic deals with each other and leaves the US out, if you try and enter that world market now for consumers, things might get more expensive because maybe less people are trading with you, maybe less people are exporting to you, so supply is down. And if you still have tariffs on other countries, there's an additional tax. But as well, if you're exporting to other countries, maybe they tariff you and they keep permanent tariffs on because they have no reason not to, because they have other supply from other countries. And that is something that can happen in the long run, and this is the stuff that we have to really consider. And is it something that we want? All right, and I'm just going to end with saying that I don't think I'm the only one worried about this. There's definitely other indications that other people are, and one good example is that the American bond market on April 9th, when those tariffs were applied and then removed, it took a serious hit. Prices dropped and yields jumped sharply. Now, admittedly, I don't know a darn thing about bonds, so I had to do a little mini research thing on what this all meant. And what you find out is that this kind of sudden sell-off of bonds in what's usually considered a safe asset versus regular investment market, it's a clear sign that investors are actually spooked, and not just about the short term, but about the long-term stability of economic policy. And just to explain it a little bit more, why is this an indication that investors are worried about the stability of the long-term US economic policy? That's because selling bonds mean that investors would rather hold cash or move money somewhere else, even if it means taking a short-term loss. This kind of reaction basically means I don't trust what's coming next and I need flexibility. So when we see bond prices fall and yields rise fast, it's like a panic signal flashing from deep inside the financial system. It means people are getting nervous not just about the markets, but about the direction of the economy and leadership in a country. All right, and that's my first very well edited and commented safe space video. I'm very sorry about my voice in this one. I think I suffered through it all right, and I don't open the comment section for these videos on purpose. I think it is not really a safe space in the YouTube comment section. I'll have other series where I open up the comment section, but not for these. The idea here is if you have anything you want to contribute to this conversation, please go find somebody to have a conversation like this with. I don't think that being in our own echo chambers is great for society, and that we should always be open to kind of take world events as they're happening and be able to talk about the way that our leaders are reacting to them. So thank you for watching. And again, this is Conviction Without Chaos.